Hello and welcome everyone to this belated deck preview for Shadow Paladin and also kicking off our V-BT02 deck previews. I'm trying out a slightly different format today. We're doing a webcam approach. I got a new webcam which is a massive bump in quality actually compared to my last one that I never actually used for videos. But I'm trying out this format. Let me know if you like it. If you don't, then I'll just go back to the old one. There's no real issue there. But I also wanted to sort of explain the reason why this is so delayed. And basically from the end of August, so 1 week before the release of this set in Japan, I went on holiday to the States, to California, for 3 weeks. So I came back in mid-September, so it was already 2 weeks past the release date. Now it's like a month since the release date. But I came back and then I had my first week of class immediately, so I was busy every single day, and then the weekend after that I had BCS London, and now we're here. So I was trying to get this out, as soon as I could, so this is essentially the soonest. So now we're going to go over Shadow Paladin. Next I'm planning to do Pale Moon, then Murakumo, and then most likely Dark Irregulars. But I'll still get everything out before the English release date, so don't worry, it will come out in time. But it's just, not as fast as it was last few sets because I wasn't in Europe, I wasn't at home for those set releases. So this is the Shadow Paladin one, and now we'll go over it. This is actually my second time recording because I messed up a little thing with my microphone earlier. So it is a force clan, so you do need your force markers, and then your main grade 3 is going to be Phantom Blaster Dragons. So this is the main Damned Charging Lance grade 3. He does have the force marker and 2 skills, first one of which is act on Vanguard Circle, counterblast 1 and retire 3 of your own rear guards. Then your opponent has to choose 3 of their own rear guards and retire them, and for that turn this unit gains plus 15k and plus 1 crit. His second skill goes right next to that, which is act once per turn on Vanguard Circle. If your opponent has 4 or less damage and 0 rear guards, you can Soul Blast a grade 3, and then your opponent has to take 1 damage in their Vanguards. So it's kind of similar to the Giga Rex in the sense that you're dealing 1 damage to your opponent, and they can also get, triggers and activate those trigger effects if they do. But you still have this very threatening skill of being able to retire your opponent's units. And sure, they still choose, but 3 is still a pretty big choice. They still have to get rid of 3 units against Axel clans. That's devastating, even against Protect clans, even against OTT, I would say. Outside of Promised Daughter, this is a really good skill. Don't forget that Promised Daughter does stop that second skill because there's basically no way for them to have 0 rear guards in the main phase. So the card is honestly really good. One thing you need to be aware of or careful of is that sometimes, if your opponent has less than 3 rear guards, sometimes it's not worth to actually do the skill because sure, the deck generates a lot of advantage, but sometimes it might be a bit more of a setback because that's your only, it's still advantage that you can use to push forward rather than advantage that you can use just to neg yourself and then neg your opponent possibly. So if your opponent has 3 or more rear guards, I think it's always worth to use it, in most cases at least. But if they have less, if they're staying at 2 rear guards, you have to really think, is this worth it? Can I come back from this? What are my resources looking like for the next turn? So I think it's important to keep that in mind, but overall it's an amazing grade 3. You can write it first, but then you won't be able to use the second skill, but you can still use the first one for that pretty threatening extra power, extra crit, and extra retire. Now our next 2 grade 3s are the Dark Dictator as well as Badberg Carr. Badberg Carr has a skill, he does have the force marker too, but his skill is once per turn on Vanguard and Rearguard Circles act, Soul Blast 1, and then you check the top card of your deck, and then you either call it or you put it to the drop zone. If you called it, it gets plus 5k power, and at the end of that turn, you retire that unit. So you basically always want to be calling it, because you can even call this on an occupied circle as well. If you call it, it's good to use something like Phantom Blaster Dragon immediately, because then you can retire something that's going to get retired anyway, so that is definitely quite nice. The extra plus 5k works as well, even if you call a trigger, and it's basically never worth to put it into the drop zone because you want to usually be, unless you're playing Luard in Premium of course, but usually you want to have that card on board, at least in Standard. And then our next final grade 3 is the Dark Dictator. Some people don't even play him, they just play 4-4. But I think Dark Dictator is fine as a first ride because he has quite a bit of power. He gains plus, his first skill is a continuous on Vanguard Circle. During your turn for each of your rear guards, he gains plus 2k power. So that's definitely very nice because you get a pretty big beater by having a full board. And then his second skill is an act once per turn. Kettle Blast 1, and then you choose a grade 2 or less from your hand and call it. And then during that turn, that unit unit gets plus 5k power, and your opponent must choose one of their rearguards and retire it. So I think this card is also quite good. It's a nice first ride, as I said, so I think just for that reason it's nice for the extra little power, and also for having the grade 3 in the soul for Phantom Blaster Dragon as well. Then we have our first grade 2, and the reason why I think the trial deck tops every now and again in big events, which is Blaster Dark. So he is one of the... one thing I should have mentioned is that there's quite a few cards like Bad Bird card that call things from either deck or from hand, and we have quite a few skills that get triggered off of being called, such as Blaster Dark himself, Vanguard or Rearguard Circle. When he appears, you counterblast 1, and then your opponent must choose one of their rearguards and retire it. Even though your opponent gets the choice, this is still a pretty big effect, because unless they're calling draw triggers, or like, you know, the vanilla draw triggers on purpose, you know, they're losing something important because they wouldn't have put it down on the field to begin with. So I think it's quite good for that reason. You can also use this when you ride. Usually in my playtesting I haven't been using it when I ride because my opponent usually doesn't call too many things at the start of the game, so that way I don't get to use it, but then I get to use the second skill, which I, you know, sometimes do, which is an act Vanguard Circle once per turn, so Vanguard Circle only. If your opponent has no rear guards, then you can discard one card from your hand, and for that turn he gets an extra drive check. So that's a pretty devastating skill, but I haven't been using it that much because often, like, my hand has all the cards that I want to use next turn, for example, and I don't really feel like losing anything, because I feel like I'll get more out of putting them on the board than to, you know, risk it for this extra drive check. So Blaster Dark is a good card, but it's just good for different reasons, and I think, you know, it depends from game to game whether you use his skills or not, but it's still a very, very nice card. Our next grade 2 is Maha, who has a very easy to understand but really cool skill, act on Vanguard and Rearguard Circle once per turn, can almost 1 and call a grade 1 or less card from your hand to Rearguard Circle, and then you draw one card and get an extra plus 5k power on Maha. So simple skill, very simple, but she gets extra power, you get an extra card in hand to make up for calling something, and you trigger your grade 1s when called effects, which we'll go into in a second. Then our last grade 2 is Cathbod. Some people play different grade 2s, but I think he's currently the best because he's such a big beater. So his skill is Rearguard Circle only. When he attacks a Vanguard, for each rearguard that you have more than your opponent, he gains plus 3k power for that battle. So it also says as an example, if you have 5 rearguards and your opponent has 2, then you gain plus 9k power. So I think he's really good because just putting one crit on him turns him into a massive beater, which is good against the protect matchups, and against anything else it's going to be good because it's a huge beater regardless. Your opponent will usually target him, which you don't really mind because you have a lot of other good grade 2s, so it's usually pretty fine. So I think right now he's the best grade 2 to play, you know, as a third grade 2 slot, so I think he is quite good for that. Then we have our 4 Karens, which is basically the one grade 1 that you want to be calling with Maha all the time, because his skill is when he's called by an effect, so either from the deck or from the hand or wherever, you Soul Blast 1, so we have another Soul Blaster on top of Bad Bear Car, and then you countercharge 1, which is really huge because this deck counterlasts quite a lot, and then for that turn he gains plus 3k, meaning he's an 11k booster / attacker, so that makes him really good and definitely worth playing as a 4 of because you want to be calling him from your effects quite a lot. I've had times where I've called him with the Bad Bear Car, and usually you're going to be calling him with the Maha if you have him in hand, so definitely very nice. Then our last grade 1 is the Nevan, or Nemain. Her skill is, it's an interesting one because it's a named once per turn. So Rearguard Circle act, you can rest her, and then you search your deck for a 5,000 power unit and call it in a Rearguard Circle that's not occupied, and then you shuffle your deck, and then it says this named unit's ability can only be used once per turn. So what that means is, if you have a Nemain and you use it to rest her and call another Nemain because she's 5,000 power, you cannot then use another Nemain, so it's only once per turn. But then let's say if you're grade 1, and let's say like you ride to your grade 1, you call your Nemain, and then you rest your Nemain to call another one, so that's all you can do. But the next turn, you ride to your grade 2, if I can separate it, that'd be nice. So you ride to your grade 2, and then you stand and draw, and then you can still use Nemain to call your third one. So then by the time you're on grade 3, you've called all your Nemains, and that's definitely very nice, and that's what makes this card so good, because it's just instant plus that you get from the very start of the game, even if you're going first. So I think it's really good for that very reason, and that's why I like her so much. So 5k power, but that hasn't stopped her from making, magical numbers with grade 3s. Then we have Sir Javelin, who has an on-call skill on Rearguard Circle, but he can be called from hand normally as well. So on call, if you have another grade 1 or less unit on the grade 1 or less rearguard on the field, you can counterblast 1 to draw 1 and he gets plus 3k. So you have a little combo going on with Maha where you use Maha's skill to call him, draw 1 card from Maha's skill, then use Sir Javelin's skill to draw an extra card. So it's pretty nice, but normally with Maha you want to be calling the Karen because Karen needs to be called by an effect to use the skill, while this can be called from hand normally, so that doesn't need to use the skill. The other card that can be called from hand normally is our last grade 1, which is Nightmare Painter. So I think he's quite good because we have 2 skills that Soul Blast quite consistently, which is the Karen and the Bad Bar. So I think, you also need grade 3 souls for the Phantom Blaster Dragon, so you don't want to be Soul Blasting those. So I think it's good to play the Nightmare Painter because his skill is, when you call him, you choose a grade 1 or less card from your drop zone and put it into your soul, and for that turn he gains plus 3k, so he's a 10k booster / attacker. So you get a bit of extra soul going for your Karens and your Bad Bar, which can be pretty good if the game is starting to get a bit long. Then our triggers are pretty standard, playing 7 crit, 5 draw, 4 heal. I'm playing the 1 Howl Owl not because I want to play an extra draw, but because I want one more target for Nemain, because eventually we're going to be running out of targets, after turn 3 basically usually. So it's kind of nice to have the extra call target for some of those turns if you want to Phantom Blaster Dragon them again, because I think it's just good for that. I don't really play it because I want to check another draw on top of my 4 existing ones. I play it more because it's a good target for Nemain, and I think that's the reason why a lot of other people play the 1 Howl Owl as well. So other than that, these are standard triggers plus your usual starter, which is Full Bow. So this is the deck, so I hope you guys liked it, and now let's take a look at how it performs in game. Getting into this match, we're going to have a matchup between my deck as well as Funfraggers. I think some people know him as the purple shirt guy, his Ashura Kaiser list, which normally Shadows have an advantage against, but seeing my opening hand I was like, ooh, if I don't draw PBD here, it's not going to be looking too good. So I think the Ashura Kaiser build is definitely quite good. I think one of the Ashura Kaiser players went 6-2 in London, which is definitely quite nice. So it's overall a pretty good deck in my opinion, and definitely, pulled the Coupler out of the bottom. So here you can see I have a really good opener in that I can ride the Karen and then use the Nemain on turn 1, which is really nice. So you can see I get myself the Nemain and then search it out, and the next turn I can search it out again. So I attack for an 8, get myself a Javelin, and he just gets the Iron Killer in the damage zone. Next, going into his next turn, he does have to ride up to grade 2, but now depending on if he calls any other units, that will decide if my Blaster Dart goes off or not. So he goes into the King of Sword, calls the Burst Riser as well as the Riser Custom, so that makes it a little bit tricky for me, but I do get the crit, so this is going to make it a 1 to pass attack. So let's see if he does pass. He's debating on using the skill of Riser Custom here, and he decides not to, and it doesn't hit in the end, so there's that. So now, my only grade 2 ride is Blaster Dark. I think Maka would have been perfect here, because then I could actually refund the Counterblast, but I had to go for the Blaster Dark, and then I was like, well, at least I can get rid of something. Both of those are good rear guards, but I won't be able to use Blaster Dark skill to retire something. So I was like, well, never mind, I guess we're just gonna roll with it. So here I go with the first Vanguard attack for 15k. I get myself that sweet Phantom Blaster Dragon in hand, which was something I was lacking, because in this matchup is where you really want that extra retire, because it's just so devastating. So he rides up to the Ashura Kaiser, gets his first Axle Circle, and now he has that Burst Riser, which is really scary in that deck. He calls down the Trance Riser, I believe it's called, or maybe it's not, I keep forgetting this. No, Jet Riser. So Jet Riser, another Burst Riser, and an Iron Killer as well. So this is a really scary field depending on his drive checks, and he does have 2 open counterblasts, so that could be pretty threatening. I get my 1 of Howl Owl in the damage zone, so I get a plus extra 10k power on the Vanguard, and then I can just intercept for that attack. And now he's attacking with a 12 on his Vanguard, and I have 20, so I can potentially just drop the 15k shield, putting myself up to 25, and that'll be, oh no, 35 actually, and that'll be a no pass. But I don't remember exactly what I did here. but he did use, this is a pretty interesting skill actually, where he used Burst Riser's skill to stand him, and now, because when he checks a grade 2 or higher, he can stand something else. So he can stand the booster now, or stand the Iron Killer, and he also, he's going to activate the Counterblast 1 to give it the plus 10k power, and he gets another grade 3 to also stand the Jet Riser. So that ended up being a really huge swing, even though the Vanguard's attack didn't pass. The reason why I let that through was because I was like, well, he either checks triggers and he hits, or he gets, you know, non-triggers, or like above grade 1, and stands extra units. I was like, I'm going to need that defensive trigger if it does come, and it did, which is a huge help in this matchup, especially because these kind of powers don't really boost up too much, so I felt like I was really getting a lot of advantage out of that. So now, originally I was planning to ride the Bad Bar car first, because then it's like, oh, I can get a few resources, I can get a grade 3 in my soul, and you know, I get that first force marker on my rearguard circle, so I was like, I can ride the Bad Bar car, but here, he's got 4 rearguards, you know, already on the board, so I was like, you know what, I want to use that PBD, so I'm going to use the Nemain first to call my last copy from the deck, and then I'll shuffle, and I'll be able to use the Damned Charging Lance to get rid of 3 of his rearguards, and we can see I'm going to do just that. So I retire my 3 Nemains and Counterblast 1, and now he has to choose 3 of his own rearguards and retire them. I'm going to get an extra 15k buff on my Phantom Blaster Dragon on top of a crit, so it retires the Iron Killer, the Jet Riser, and also one of the Burst Risers. So that's definitely a very nice increase in advantage for me. So here I'm going to call the Babar card and use a skill to Soul Blast 1 and call the top card of my deck. It's a heal trigger, which is a bit unfortunate because I was actually in the zone for healing because I have more damage than my opponent. So, but it's okay, it's still a 10k booster, so I don't really mind all that much. I called down the Blaster Javelin to be able to draw an extra card, and then I just swap positions because that heal trigger is getting retired regardless, and I don't want to lose any more units than that. So there's going to be an 18k swing to the Burst Riser, which means he only needs a 10k guard, but he drops to 15, and then this Phantom Blaster Dragon is hitting with a total of 2 damage, but because I got a heal crit, meaning I had 2 heals on top of my deck at first, I deal 3 damage in total, so that's actually huge. He does heal one of them and he gets a crit as well, so that does kind of neutralize my attacks a little bit, but he only has 2 cards in hand, so I was kind of thinking here, you know, I'm probably best off attacking the rear because I can get a crit next turn regardless if I really want to push for game. Here he re-rides to get himself a second Axle Circle and to get that perfect Riser because he has 2 open Counterblast, and he has both the Maximum Riser and the Burst Riser to get himself massive attacks going. So the Burst Riser attacks for a 32k, which is pretty scary. I bank that on a defensive trigger, and then now he's going to be attacking with well, that was the Burst Riser attack, which I guarded with the Karen, and then now he attacks with a Perfect Riser for just 12k, but I know past that, I'm like, I know he's gonna go for the all-in if I let him go for it, so I just know past it. He keeps attacking my car, and I'm like, damn, you know, I checked my soul because I was like, oh, do I need this Nightmare Painter? And I was like, ah, no, never mind, I don't actually need it, so I had to let that through, so it's no big deal there. Also, another reason why I attacked the rear last turn was because I want to actually keep my opponent on 4 damage, because if I top deck another Phantom Blaster Dragon, I can actually use a skill to put my opponent to 5 just like that. So here I was thinking, oh well, why should I call from hand when I can just use Car's skill to call myself something else? I think one little misplay that, well, not really a misplay, but what I could have done is, you know, either not retired the car that I called or retired the other car, because then I could have still used the car earlier. But here you can see I Damn Charging Lance, he has no cards left, well, no cards that he can properly guard with left in hand, so I got rid of his 2 rear guards and I got an extra damage. So here I'm going to be dealing 2 damage, and he needs a heal to survive this, and he gets the Maximum Riser and the Perfect Riser, and that's going to be game. So that's going to be it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed this deck preview. Once again, I apologize for how late it is, but you know, this is the earliest I could have possibly done it, so I hope it's still enjoyable and still something you wanted to see. I'll be doing Pale Moon next, which is the clan I'm most excited about. I had to do Shadows first because I know it's the fan favorite, and it used to be my favorite too, so I felt like just out of obligation I should have done it first. So I hope this pleases you Shadow Paladin fans. If you have any questions, as always, you can ask them in the comments and I'll do my best to answer. And as always, I guess we're gonna do our usual sign off, so don't forget to check out the second channel, to click the bell button, check out the social medias in the description, and join the Discord channel if you haven't already. But on that note, that's gonna be it for me today, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.